Grant, thank you. I'm reminded when you were speaking, I don't think we're ever as good as our friends think we are, and we're never as bad as our enemies. But, Headmaster, and well, look, it's a lot of thoughts are going through my head when I hear people speak. Can I just firstly say that nights of this kind are very important. I think we are a country which unfortunately is a very poor respecter of history, and we don't abide very much by tradition. We have great difficulty, I think, defining what kind of philosophy, political philosophy, guides us. And I always think that the best way to define our country and institutions such as this is that we need to be what I call radical conservatives. In other words, we have to know what it is we're trying to keep, what it is we're seeking to protect, but we've got to be radical enough to know what it is we need to change. And I always felt in the brief time that I was at King's, and I'm going back to, I can remember tonight as I hear you speak, Grant and Bruce, that was a beautiful recitation of this in Lloyd. Marvellous, marvellous stuff, and I think in those speeches that you've heard tonight, I think that is eloquent evidence of the kind of education that is available to people at this wonderful school. But I can remember out of the blue getting a phone call from the headmaster, the Reverend Curl, and I was in Queensland, and I didn't know who the Reverend Curl was, and he explained himself and he said, could he see me? It was completely out of the blue. How he knew who I was, I don't know. I was 27 years of age, I think, and so I came down. I remember the airfare was $48 return because I had to buy the airfare, and then when I got there, there was a little cheque to refund me for the cost of the airfare. And what impressed me, I know that on many fronts, Mr. Curl was criticised, as all headmasters are, as all of us are. We've all got our weaknesses. But what impressed me then, and I can remember now, he told me that he was really concerned about academic standards, and he'd heard that I was a bit of a belter on that front, and I want you to do something down here, and we've got to just lift the whole show. And he gave me this bit of a lecture, really, in a strange sort of a way. And then I was the first coach of a rugby schoolboys side. That was the Queensland schoolboys side. And he told me that I wouldn't be coaching rugby. This will be a full-time job. We've got to concentrate here on scholarship and all the rest of it. And I was quite happy about all of that. And so down I came. And I well remember, Patrick's here, Patrick Walters, I remember, and Peter, people at this table, this man here, Stacey Barlow, if I'd been coaching Australia, he would have played for Australia. Stacey Barlow, what a play you were. And so then Peter Harvey, put them all over here, won GPS track titles for me, and Richard played. Richard and I, Aldous Hicks, where are you, Aldous? Aldous came to me after I'd come out of Canberra, working with the Prime Minister, and wanted to reinvigorate or reinstate actually the old boys. And I said, Aldous, I've got too much to do, because this is extraordinary too. When I left the Prime Minister's office, having then also been headhunted, it's hard to believe that the biggest issue that employers couldn't address was something they'd never heard of. And they didn't know what it was. And the union movement had completely overtaken the employer institutions in this country, and the issue was superannuation. And the real concern was that the mobilisation of labour and unions would actually purchase BHP. And these people came to the Prime Minister Fraser and said, you know, we have this bloke, because we've got to get someone out there in the field who can argue the employer case and so on. So I've come back with this massive mandate to do something about superannuation and deal with people like Simon Crean at the time. And Aldous confronts me and says, oh, the old boys are doing it, you've got to come. I said, Aldous, I don't have any time at all. Anyway, you must be rather persuasive, Aldous. So I did, and we arrived with 5 players turned up. We finished up with 5 teams, and we won a few premierships too. So how do I get on that? I'm like, this is like the 2 Ronnies, isn't it? You sort of get sidetracked and you come back to it. Like, oh, hang on, I haven't forgotten. So anyway, I arrived, and so I remember he then said to me, so we settled in, and the first person I saw when I went to C6 was a fellow called Richard Knight. I'll never forget this. And he sat right up in the right-hand corner, and he was leaning back. I'm talking to the C6, you know, I'm not much older than they are, and he's got his legs crossed out the window. And I said, what do you think you're doing? And this chap was the son of the bloke whose signature was on the banknotes. I mean, the father was the governor of the Reserve Bank. And so that's what I'm touching, you know. So I said, listen, we're coming to get results. So I had to spell all this out, of course. I think they thought it was some sort of ogre. But to take your point, Grant, I mean, this is the key, headmaster, I think, in all of this. They will never forgive you if you don't stand for something. They might think momentarily and temporarily this is grey, so soft, and so like the stupid decision that's been made this week in New South Wales about, oh, well, we're going to make maths compulsory for everybody up to the HSC, but you won't have to sit an exam, it won't continue to HSC. Well, people are saying, you're kidding me. I mean, if there's nothing at the end, if there's no test at the end, there's no point in doing it. And all this nonsense about the fact that people are frightened by examinations and by tests, will you go out into the public place and find out whether there's an examination or not? I mean, you apply for a job, your mum and dad aren't on the interview panel. We've got to inculcate this into kids. And you know, I walk over this, wherever I go, someone comes up to me, and we just had this tonight. I mean, I'm not pumping up my tyres. I'm simply saying I'm flattered and fascinated that people actually remember that they enjoyed what we did. At the time, I'm sure they thought it was really tough. But I didn't brook any interference with any of this stuff. We had work to do, and can I just say to any teachers in the room, we never, ever, ever set homework. I don't believe in homework, and I think if you can't do what the syllabus says you have to do in the classroom, either you're crook or the syllabus is crook. Because education goes beyond the classroom. There's an education once the bell goes at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There's an education, it may well be on the rugby paddock, it may well be in the arts centre. It may well be just watching the jackass in the tree. It may be watching the sunset. It may be listening to your dad at the meal table at night. That is all educative. Education is a 24-hour thing. And this notion today that we burden these kids with homework, and we don't burden the kids, we burden the parents, and the parents are terrorised by this stuff because it's marked and added up, and it's no fun. And we're taking the joy out of it. And I hope, and people say, oh, well, you know, do you miss being a teacher? I said, I'm still a teacher. I'm trying to teach these stupid people in Canberra how to respond to the crowd. So, you know, the mentality then, which was inherent, it was endemic within the system, that we were just going through the motions. Now, if you allow young people to go through the motions, they'll think you're terrific at the time, but they won't forgive you later. So I think the Reverend Curl has not got the credit that he deserves, because at every point, in very, very controversial circumstances, and I can understand that this was all a bit difficult for some people to swallow, but he backed me to the hilt. And I remember him then coming to me one afternoon and he said, oh, they've announced the rugby coaches. He told me that I wasn't to be coaching, having coached a premiership side at Brisbane Grammar School, where I came from, and then I coached the schoolboy side. He said, you can't coach rugby. He said, oh, I think they put the list up. You'll love this. This is vanity now. So the list was on the notice board, see? So where did I look first? Who's coaching the first 15? So I looked the first one, I wasn't there. And the second 15, I wasn't there. The third, the fourth, the fifth. And headmaster did go down to the tenths. Then you 12th, yeah. Then you asked Stacey, yeah. So went down to then you went to the 16 A's and went to 8. You went to the 12th, never near them. And then went to the 16 A's, B's, C's, D, 16 A, F. And then you went to the 15s, and I'm still not there. You went to the 14s, not there, and then 13 A's. Mr. Jones doing the 13 A's. So up I went with all these shattering and screaming kids up onto the 13 A's, and away we started. But the point about it was, there is no, I took the philosophy, there is no point in playing rugby or playing cricket or going into the arts centre or doing whatever else is being done unless there is an educative value to what you're doing. Because we're in the game of education. This has to be an extension of the educational experience. So therefore, on the rugby paddock, you must have discipline. There must be content. Without discipline and content, you can't have anything. I mean, this is part of the problem politically. When you say, oh, they don't stand for it. You know, what you mean is, certain political parties don't know what they stand for at the moment. They're just absolutely confused about what they do about drought, see? And they say, oh, we're going to build dams down the track. Hello, hello. People are shooting breeding stock now. We have to feed the breeding stock now so that the farmers don't go broke. Oh, we're worried about the surplus. Well, you won't have a surplus if you don't have a rural economy. So in education, if you haven't got discipline for a start, and content, you've got nothing. And that means also on the rugby paddock, you're wasting young people's time. And I always found with the young people there that they just couldn't get enough of it. Couldn't get enough of it. And I remember saying to the headmaster at the time, can I have a yarn with you about the school track and field championship? Yeah, what? Well, I said, why do we call it the school track and field championship when the bulk of the school don't even run that? What do you mean? Well, I said, I think if it's a school championship, everyone should run. How do you do that? Easy. I said, I'm prepared to go up into the white oval and we'll grade every athlete, every person in the school will be graded. And so then they'll run against their grade. And they'll get an experience of winning. They'll also understand a bit about losing. So we would grade them. And I'd take people like Peter and everybody up there. And it was a hard task. The boys helped me. They did all of this. So when we had the school track and field championship, everybody ran. And so we would have open A, B, C, D, E, and there'd be people running 100 metres in 16.5 seconds. And they'd be running against other people who were running in 16.5 seconds. And they'd be busting their guts out. And it was the greatest thrill I'd ever had. And Mum and Dad came along to see me competing. And the notion of being involved and competing and having that experience was part of that educational thing. Now, then we incorporated a whole heap of other events where the whole school was involved. The houses went berserk. They were competing against one another because the young people out there want more than a wet lettuce across their educational sideboard. And I don't think education today is doing, we're betraying kids. We take the lowest common denominator stuff. And the syllabuses are too crowded, we're teaching things that kids don't need to know. That's the responsibility of somebody else. So that was the first part of my experience there. I think the other thing which is important is, I suppose we call it culture, don't we? What at the end of the day do we stand for? We have to know that. And if we don't have a certain premise from which we're operating, it's very difficult. Parents are paying a lot of money and they need some value for their money if we're going to get them to come back. So we've got to be able to explain to people why they do things. For example, why do we have people in competitive activity? My great regret is there are headmasters in the system now who don't believe in competition. Well, I don't think they know anything about education. Because the fundamental first disposition of kids is to be competitive. At 6 years of age, Mum and Dad think, oh, do you think it's safe to buy him a bike? Buy her a bike? Do you think that's safe? Or should we wait a bit later? What if he falls out, get a bleeding nose? So we get him a bike. And we're very careful about teaching him how to ride it, where to ride it, and so on. He learns that. The next thing he does, he looks over the fence to see if the kid next door's got a bike, and he wants to race it down the street. Because there's this competitive instinct in him. It's inherent in human nature, wherever we are. Now, if we don't say one of the reasons we're involved in competitive, and it's debating, whatever, I'm not suggesting everything happens in sport. I also introduced the public speaking competition and the debate, the same principle. Listen, we're going to debate something. Come on, we're going to do some homework. We're going to beat that other bloke over there. You'll only beat him with content and presentation and prosecution. This is how you do it. And you have to teach them that. That's what you're there for. So when you say to someone, well, why do we do these things? Why, for example, do we play competitive sport? Well, one, there's a scoreboard. And these kids have got to learn early there's a scoreboard in life too. And you can't argue with the scoreboard. So, years ago, Rodney Laver, arguably the greatest tennis player ever, had won the Grand Slam. Australian, French, Wimbledon and US championships. He went back to Wimbledon the next year in 1969 and he lost in the second round to a good American player called Tommy Gorman. Now, I was in Hopman squads with Rod Laver. He was a lot older than I was, but where Hopman sort of took all these people around the country and you all thought you were going to win Wimbledon. But nonetheless, I sort of knew him well. And Rodney, the best you could say about Rodney was he was monosyllabic. I mean, he wasn't too smart, but he was a tremendous tennis player. So Rodney has been beaten by Tommy Gorman, and the media have poured over it. And I thought, oh God, here's a go. What's he going to say? And I can remember, you don't set out to remember. but I can remember what he said. I asked him about the defeat, and he said, oh, well, you know, the conditions were bad out there today. It was a very, very windy day. The conditions out there were bad today, but it's the same for both of us. He said, no person can expect to win always. But he said, I'll be back. And I thought, I wrote to him. I said, mate, I can't believe you. It's the most brilliant statement in defeat. So the first reason we do these things is because there's a scoreboard. And you can't argue with the scoreboard. You can't make excuses. We've got to tell kids that. The second thing, of course, is it involves discipline. When you go onto the rugby paddock or the cricket thing, you might argue with the bloke puts his finger up and says you're out. Well, you've got no hope. I mean, he's in charge. Right or wrong, you have to learn that there is a discipline involved in accepting the control that other people have over you, and that will happen in life, if you want to get on in life. The third thing I think that you tell people why we do these things is that, and that's what I think we would have, that's what tonight's about, is mateship. You see, long after you've forgotten the scores, the mateships remain, the friendships remain. And I tried to do that when I was with the Wallabies. And people used to say to me, well, do you think you've got a good team? And I said, I can easily define what a good team is. I know when I've got a team. I've got a good team when we line up on the paddock and we sing the national anthem, and as the boys stand there, they want the bloke either side of them to be the godfather to their kids. If that's what the bloke wants, I've got a team, and we had a team. Now, of course, they argue now they're professional. It's a professional era, which is a heap of rubbish. No one was more professional than we were. Professionalism's got nothing to do with what's in your pocket, your wallet. Professionalism's a state of mind. And professionalism is about attitudes. And there's nothing wrong with arguing to young people that you want them to be the best. I had to speak many years ago now at a place at Castle Hill, which from where I was a long way away. I mean, I lived out there, as you know, but anyway, when I was coming back, I was starved. I hadn't eaten all day, and I was coaching Australia at the time, and I thought, do I, don't I? And I thought I'll pull in at a McDonald's, hoping no one would see me. So, particularly people like Simon Poyder, they wouldn't see me at McDonald's. So I went in, I've never been to McDonald's, and I got a Big Mac or something. And I thought, I'm nearly out here. And I heard the person behind me saying, excuse me, are you Alan Jones? And I looked up, and here was a person who was about 15 years of age. And I said, yes, I am. Got the brown bag, you know. And he said, would you speak at my school? I said, hang on. Listen, I said, I never say no to anybody. So why don't you take my number down, ring my secretary tomorrow, and we'll see what we can sort of work out. Okay, he was very excited, and I took off. I thought, I've got out of this. Next day I get back from the radio station, and Louise said, she was my peer at the time, she said, oh, you've agreed to speak at a school. Hang on, what? Oh, she said, no, a young fella rang and said that you'd agreed to speak. No, I didn't agree to speak. I just said, oh, he thinks. And look, I will tell you, the school was Riverview. And so anyway, so I thought, well, if the kid thinks I'm going, I said, look, slot it in. So the day Julie arrives, and I've got a driver comes to pick me up. And we go, because he said to address the school. And I drive and get the gate, I club the gates at Riverview. I walk inside, there's kids kicking footballs on the oval on the left, and there's people on the tennis courts on the right, there's a basketball court, there's a tuck shop there also. And I said to the driver, what day are we? And he said, I think I'm not going on the wrong day here, because keep driving anyway, because I'm supposed to meet this kid out in the front, which is right around the back. So I go around the back, and I can see a kid there. You know, I'd forgotten who the kid was that addressed me at the McDonald's joint. So I got out, and this kid walks up. Mr. Jones, welcome. He said the handshake. And now come with me, please. And I said, oh. And I can hear these people, kids around saying, that's Alan Jones. That's Alan Jones. I said, can I just ask you something from him? What's going on here? What do you mean? But I said, I thought I was addressing the school. Oh, no, he said, just me mates. turns to me, mate. So here we go. And this kid is in the 16Es, and he's got just the 15 and the 16Es. So I thought, well, here we go. And the door shut, and people with their nose on the window pane. And I said, right. Now I said, let me say something, because I never get an opportunity to address just 15 people. I never get the chance to learn 15 young people. So let me tell you something that you might like to hear. I hate the lot of you. Can I tell you why I hate you? Because you see, you're intellectually and emotionally dishonest. See, you'll say, and I know you'll say, I love surfing, and I love, I don't know who it was, Midnight Oil. But you'll never say, I'd love to captain the first 11. I'd love to win the English prize. Why? I'll tell you why. You've been brainwashed. You're terrified what your peer group will say if you actually articulate your ambition. That's why I hate you. You're intellectually dishonest. Now I know what you want. You want to walk across the stage and be noticed and be important, and you're frightened to commit to it. But if you don't commit to it, you'll never get there. Give me that piece. And there was a desk here, and there was one of those long Phil's cap pads. Give me that Phil's cap pad. So he gave me the Phil's cap pad. So I said, I've ripped these pages off the wall, and I gave everyone a page. See? And I said, now, I want you to write down exactly what you're thinking as a result of what I've said, because you know that what I'm saying is correct. So you just write down and tell me. And I said, by the way, we won't talk. I said, this is the only bit of rugby I'll give you. No one talks when Michael Liner kicks for goal. That was the only bit of rugby I gave him. And I said, and listen, we're just going to write diamonds, just little bits, not a great big lump of dirty coal. I don't want 15 lines, just a diamond. And I'll give you 10 minutes. No talk. I sat there. Now I made a mistake because I then said, oh sorry, don't put your name on it. Because we're always frightened to identify with what is ours. That's part of the problem. You're not prepared to say, yeah, I did that. That was me. So I said, okay, don't worry about it, just hand them up. So I collected them. And the mistake I made was that when I read them out, I didn't know who they were or ask. So I'm reading this stuff out. Now, a 15-year-old wrote this, which should be the text for the nation. In 10 minutes, a 15-year-old. I watched them tearing the building down. Demolition men on my side of town. They can easily wreck in a day or two what builders have taken years to do. And I ask myself as I go my way, which of these roles am I going to play? Am I a builder with ruler and square? Mapping it out with the next line. Mapping things out with extra care, Or am I a stalker who stalks the town, content with the labour of tearing down? So you see, when Lee Matthews was coach of Collingwood, and they hadn't won a premiership from God knows when, rang up, he said, oh, will you come and speak to the team before they were playing in the final? The winner would go to the grand final. And I said, oh, you're okay, right. But I said, I do these things and I pay my own way because I don't want to be beholden to anyone. I said, yes, I will. So on the Thursday before I would go down, he rings. What are you going to say? Oh, God, I've got no idea. I said, I wait, stand up and I wait till I see what's going on. But I said, I'll tell you one thing I will say. I said, we've got to really, if we're going to win on Saturday, we have to confront the demons that these people haven't won for 50 years. Oh, God, he said, don't mention that to the middle of that'll. Well, mate, if we don't mention that, I may as well not come down. So I went down, and there they were, all sitting in front of me. Mind you, there were more what I call blazer brigade than there were players. We still have that problem. But nonetheless, I then said to them, now look, the first thing we have to confront is, when you say goodbye to your wife and your girlfriend tomorrow morning, they won't tell you what they're thinking, but I'll tell you what they're thinking. They're thinking, oh, you poor coot. I mean, we've been there before. You're going out to the MCG, you're getting thrashed. And I hope you can handle it. That's what they're thinking. Now, so what you've got to do is to make up your mind that era is over. So I would recommend we don't run onto the paddock on the MCG, we walk. And we look up at the stands and say, look, I know you've come, why you've come to see this other mob win, but I've got news for you. Hey, have a look at the scoreboard. At the end of today, we'll be the people you want to talk about. You've got to go out there, walk out, boom, in you go. Well, Tony Shaw wrote his book after that, and he records this speech, because I never know what I've said, but I must have said something. So anyway, they clobbered someone in the final, and then they caught me back for the other thing. And they won the grand final. But the key point is to make people believe that what they seek, they're capable of achieving. And that is the central educational component of what we're doing in every subject. Now, that's not to say we're only interested in winners. Yeah, when I went there as the senior English master, the two things I wanted to do. I wanted to actually belt the tribe out of the best. So the exam years were 6A and 4A, but then I took 1F and 4F. 1F and 4F. The kids who'd never read a thing. So how do I get them interested in reading? How do I get them interested in speaking? And of course I have plenty of crickets. So we would play, there'd be a cricket match on the weekend, or rugby match. I'd go to 1F, and I'd say, well, what happened at the weekend? What do you think? And they'd speak. Now, if they're speaking about who played well, that's the use of the English language. Now, if they said, oh, he done well, no, start again, he did, and you correct them. When they then saw that I was interested in what they were talking about, I knew they'd be interested in what I was talking about. But of course, Alan Jones's critic said, oh, he goes into 1F and talks rugby. I didn't talk cricket, talk anything. To get them to speak, then I'd get them to write something down. And suddenly, they would start to come towards me, and then I could say, well, listen, we've got a couple of things we're learning here, because your parents are paying a lot of money. And so this 1F and 4F, and these people, we gave them an experience. And you can't do that if there's not a commitment and some passion in terms of what you've got to believe in what you're doing. Otherwise, you're fake and a phony. So the kids can see through all of this. And so I think there's a lot of weaknesses in today's education. Back to the Kings, though, I think that one of the things that I've noticed, and I've now got my niece's little boy's there, beautiful kid, Hamilton, he absolutely loves it. And I go along, he tells me all these funny stories, which is part of the parcel, isn't it, of growing up, but he loves the experience. Now, he's not going to be very flashy in the classroom, but he's pretty smart outside the classroom. But we would be wrong, though, if we develop the notion that education is about buildings and infrastructure. Now, we have the most magnificent infrastructure. The building program has been extraordinary. And it's a wonderful, wonderful environment in which to learn. But I would just say this, and it's the same as the rugby, and they have now 156 people working for Australian rugby. And when I coached Australia, there were 5. We beat the world, they can't beat anyone. So it might be that the system's wrong. So I'm not suggesting we go back to go into the future, but I think we did pretty well at the time. In one of the years we came 1st, 3rd and 9th in the state in English out of a class of 22, and sure as hell was competitive. And so there is more to it than buildings and giving them the flashiest environment in which to learn. We've got to go beyond that and say, well, you have to justify the infrastructure and the spend here by making sure that you deliver wherever you go. Now, Banjo Patterson said, a man who's done his best has done enough. We're not asking people to win premierships and to come top of the state. We're asking them to do their best. We've got to give them a leg up. We've got to help them. We've got to do some homework with the teacher. And we've got to motivate them and commit them and be interested in them and know them. But at the same time, they're not always going to be winners. They're all in their own way. Some of them might be very good at just growing roses. What do you say, we're going to grow roses? Make sure they're the best roses in the street. Then the best roses in the suburb. Then perhaps the best roses in New South Wales. It might be the best roses in Australia. Something terrific about growing roses. I wouldn't know where to start. I've got degrees, but I don't have been road growing. And these kids have got to feel as though you're interested in what they're good at. The job is to find out what they're good at. And now when people gather here tonight, I think above all else, the reflection and recollection is, well, what did the school do for me? And I think the conclusion is there were many positive impacts. There were a lot of things for me. We were the first school in Australia to take an international, a schoolboy side internationally. We went to England. And never heard of it, had to get permission from every man and his dog to actually leave the shores. But we did that on the basis that that experience was part of the educative experience. And all I have done is, I suppose, in my life is tried to extend that. I've had a very privileged life, but it doesn't come without sacrifice and effort. And when I worked for the Prime Minister, I was the only speechwriter and senior advisor. Now Scott Morrison's got 57. Perhaps that's why he doesn't know what to do about drought, and we actually did, because you had to work with the resources you had. And then when that opportunity came to, well, it started here with the King's Old Boys, and we won, and then someone said, "I'll coach New South Wales," and we won, and then Manly, and we won, and it was all right. People like winning, hello? So why do we apologise? They like winning. Admit it. Then say, well, how do we do it? See, I don't think doing well is hard. Getting the right methodology is hard. Revising and adjusting the way in which we go about things. And equally in the classroom, not every child is going to respond in the same way. And that's why you've got to adjust what you're doing to identify the individual weaknesses. But this notion about class sizes is rubbish. I mean, if you know what you're about and you're committed to what you're about, you can teach on a hot tin roof. You can teach 50 people. But I'm sorry, if you don't know what you're about and you're not much interested in what you're about, and that transmits to the kids, well, it can be 10 in the class, they'll learn nothing. So I think that, when we meet on nights like tonight, it's very reflective. One of the great privileges I've had in my life is that I got to know Sir Donald Bradman very, very well, and we had lunch together for 10 months of the year for every year for 11 years. And we had the same meal. We met at the Kionga Golf Club. We had the same meal every month. So we had Mediterranean soup, we had whiting fillets. He loved his apple pie and ice cream. We had a bottle of Chardonnay, and we talked. He was fairly argumentative sort of bloke, but he was a lovely person. And anyway, one day we were having an argument about W.G. Grace. And he was trying to tell me, and I'd read a couple of biographies of W.G. Grace, and his test average was 37.4. And he was trying to tell me that this was the greatest. Grace was the greatest, and he went on with it. And we had, not an argument, but we had a discussion about, and who was I to argue with him, so I deferred to him, and I just told him what I thought and so on. Anyway, I was only back about 3 days, and there's the letter. I could always tell his handwriting. And there was a big sort of parcel. And he'd sent me a book. And there was a covering note on the book. And he said, look, read, and I've still got the letter. He said, read W.G. Grace. He said, one day, he said, I hope to walk through the grace gates in the Elysian fields, he said, and remind the great man that I was grateful for his example. But he said, I'll refer you to page 153 of the book. The book was by a remarkable Fleet Street journalist, A.A. Thompson, and he'd written a biography of Grace that I hadn't read. And on page 153, it was about the death of Grace. And in literature, there's a thing called pathetic fallacy, and pathetic fallacy, which Wordsworth was very keen on arguing and documenting. And pathetic fallacy is a circumstance in which nature expresses a sympathy for the natural environment. And I'm sure we've all experienced that. So on a day that someone close to you passes away, suddenly you feel the storm clouds above, or it's raining, or it's foggy, or it's windy, and you think, what a dreadful day for a funeral. But it's a dreadful day because it's a dreadful loss that we're mourning. So on that page 153, A.A. Thompson describes the day of Grace's funeral. And he quotes 4 lines of poetry from the French-born English poet Hilaire Belloc, which I think relates to us here tonight. And in those 4 lines, he was talking about Grace and whether runs mattered or victories mattered, and in a sense, what mattered is what we're celebrating here tonight. And Hilaire Belloc said, from quiet times and first beginnings, out to the undiscovered ends, there's nothing worth the wear of winning but laughter and the love of friends. And so tonight, that's it. My table. I'm very honoured that you've asked. And then you also asked if there's a few people that I'd like to sit with. Well, these were people I'd had an involvement with. And I don't quite know exactly what year Stacey played, or what year Peter won the GPS Mile, or what year Peter won the shot put, or Patrick. I don't know. That's past. There's nothing worth the wear of winning but laughter and the love of friends. And so I think that what you're doing here is to recreating an environment in which those who made beautiful friendships in this remarkable and privileged environment want to return on nights such as this to celebrate the friendship and the laughter that we enjoyed then and hopefully will continue to enjoy. So thank you for having me. Very much.